Hello and welcome yet again to Hannah's House of Music. Today this is lesson 8 and we are going to touch on the notes and their rests. Okay, so the notes that we have learned so far, we have a semi-breve whole note and its rest is usually on the fourth line, 1, 2, 3, 4 of the stave, and it comes down like that. Okay, then if you split a whole note into two equal parts, you'll get half notes, and the half note rest is on the third line of the stave, and you put it upright like that. It should not fill the whole box. Okay, so when a student is learning, be careful not to draw this kind of a rest and then it's filling the whole place, because as I had said earlier, semi-breve is half of something, and now that I'm speaking about it, semi is half. So semi-breve is half of a breve. So a breve would be a semi-breve looking like note, then it has some lines on the ends like that. So now that would be a breve. And there is a rest for the breve, which would be the one that fills the whole box like that. So be careful as you shade not to do a half note rest that it's so big it almost competes with a breve rest. Okay, so there you go, a breve. Some books draw it with one line, some with double lines on both ends. So you can just clarify that. Back to our lessons, semi-breve and a semi-breve rest. So this, just like you would hold onto this note for 4 counts as you play it, or blow if you're playing a wind instrument, and sustain the tone for 4 counts, when you see the rest, an equivalent rest, it means we won't be hearing anything or any tone from your instrument for the same number of counts. So for every note value, that the length at which it should be sounded, there is an equivalent rest for it. So if you're going to sustain your note for 2 beats, you can also rest for 2 beats. If you're going to play a note for 1 count, quarter note, there's an equivalent rest period for a single count. That looks almost like a Z, and then letter C at the bottom right there. You join them. Sometimes it's good to do it separate. There's a Z and a C. Then put them together, Z, looking like it's a little bit upright there, and then a C at the bottom. This one most students struggle to draw. The quaver, an equivalent rest to it. It looks like a number 7, but not a straight 7. So there's a curve to it. And there's usually a little bit of a circular sign like that. Just round it off and make it look musical and nice. Same case here. So semi-quaver, 2 tails. Then you'd have 2 tails. And the first one is usually slightly longer than the others. The 3-tail note, demi-semi-quaver, you will have a demi-semi-quaver rest. Then you have the 4, hemi-demi-semi-quaver, a hemi-demi-semi-quaver rest would also be that. So remember, the value, 4 counts, 4 count resting, 2 counts, 2 counts rest, 1 count, a 1 count rest, and it's easy to draw it when you think of it in 2 parts and then you join them together like that. Think number 7, that's a quaver rest there, semi-quaver, 2 lines, demi-semi-quaver, 3 lines, hemi-demi-semi-quaver, and its rest will have 4 lines. That's it for the rests. We move on quickly to the tie. A tie could be for a number of reasons, because we know music has rules, and for instance, you would have a piece of music that is in 2/4, yet in your composition you would want one of your bars or a section of your music to feel like it was 4 counts, yet the time signature won't allow you to have 4 counts in a bar. So what would you do in that case? For instance, that's 1 bar. It's complete all the way down like that. Okay, and then you have bar 2 would be complete like that. So if you want your bar 3 to feel like you have 4 counts, and you do that, you have to have 2 counts there that aligns with the time signature 2 beats in a bar. So what you would do in this case then, you would draw a note on the same space again, and that tie sign acts like a plus sign, as you would a plus sign in mathematics. 2 plus 2 would be 4. So now that's how you would successfully get your 4 count tone in your music without affecting or fighting with the time signature that is indicated there. So that is one of the reasons to just keep. And another reason would be in terms of grouping of notes. There's sometimes you would want your notes to sound like they are tied, or to make some beats longer, but how the notes have been constructed or how they're supposed to be grouped does not allow for what you would have wanted to do. And so in that case, you can add in a tie for it to work out. This is just but one of the examples. So with ties, there are some rules to it. So it's not every time. Most students call this a smiley. I would see why. Maybe they look at it like that. Pretty close, you know. And so when you are teaching students and they're calling it smileys, then you would understand where they're coming from. So that looks like a smile. The only thing that is allowed to come in between tied notes is a bar line. You cannot have another note in between these two and call it a tie. So for instance, we have some rules when we are doing ties in music. So basically, the rules are these 5 rules. The tied notes should be on the same line or space. They should be next to each other, which means there's no note between them. The only thing that can come in between them would be a bar line. And that you tie head to head, okay? So let's go step by step. Same line or space. So for instance, here my note. That note is right there, and that one is there. And I do that. Now, this one has, and all these rules, it should agree. It should not fight any of the rules. So if you look at these 2 notes, they would agree with number 2. They are next to each other. Good. But are they on the same line or space? Rule number 1. That is no. They are not on the same line. They are not on the same space. So this would not be considered a tie. It would have another name. We would call that a slur. And in music, a slur would mean play smoothly. But that's a lesson for another day. Same notes. If I did that, then I pull in that, then I do that, and then I join like that. So in both these scenarios, we have tied, we call these parts the head of the note, the head, and then the stems, okay? So in both these scenarios, it agrees, tie head to head. Next to each other. These ones are not next to each other. There is something in between them. So that is the reason this would fail. Again, this would be a slur. If you were playing this, you would play these notes smoothly. But it doesn't fit to be defined as a tie. Now, let's pick one that would work as a tie. There's that, and there's that, for instance. And then I tie head to head. Okay? So those 2 notes there, are they on the same line or same space? In our case, they are inside the same space. Rule number 2, next to each other. Indeed, there's no note in between them. Rule number 3, tie head to head. from one head of the note to another head. And then 4, you can tie more than 2 notes. So in our case, I'll just go up here and that this is not correct, even if you tie it like that. Okay, this that looks tricky, but it's still not a tie because this note is not joined to this one is not tied to these two. So when you have that scenario, the correct and proper way then would be the first one ties into the second one and the second one ties into the third one. Now that is a tie. So you've tied 2 plus 2 plus 2, which gives you a total of 6 counts in that case. The rule here would work. Same line or space. In both of these, we are on the same space. Next to each other. They are all next to each other. You tie head to head, from head to head to head. And then you can tie more than 2 notes. So in our case, we have 3 notes here. And then you can tie notes of different values. So for instance, we can do a crochet tied into a minim, tied into a semi-brief. You could easily do that. So that's what that means. You can tie from different values. This is a 1 count note, 2 count notes, 4 count notes, and then they add up. This one would be 7 counts total. All right. The tricky one would be this one. Okay. So in this case, the note with the stem will dictate the side in which the tie will go. So if you do this, you're supposed to tie notes, tie head to head. Much as a semi-brief doesn't have a stem, so either way that you choose to tie a semi-brief, whether from the top or from the bottom is fine. So if you had 2 semi-briefs, you have to tie, if you had 2 semi-briefs, you had to tie, and you tie up here, or here you go and you tie down here, there. So semi-briefs you can tie from the bottom and you can tie them from the top as well. But if it's a semi-brief next to a note that has a stem, if you tie from semi-brief and go under that way, it will be like you're tying from under the head, from the neck downwards, or from stem to stem. Also, stem to stem would be wrong kind of tying. If you had these 2 notes, for instance, and then you tie like that from under here, that's not proper way of tying notes. So in our case here, the best way would be semi-brief to the minim, you tie from the top so that it ties the semi-brief's note to the head of the half note instead of head to neck. So in that case, this would be improper and this would be the proper way to tie the notes. So a tie acts as a plus sign and it joins the notes that have been tied together. So it's, if this is 2 counts, you tie onto that and onto that, it becomes 2 plus 2 plus 2, which is 6. And if it's just 2 crochets next to each other, say for example they're on a line like that, you tie head to head, then 1, 2, and you can even tie if you were in 2, 2, 2, 4, and you have that joined to quavers, and that bar should be complete as it is like that. It's possible to tie this note to that, so you get your 1.5 count beat without having to break the rhythm and how you beam the notes in 2/4 time, because there's also grouping of notes that is usually very particular to the time signature you have. So that is all for today. So those are the rules in ties. The notes must be next to each other. They must be on the same line or space. You tie head to head. You can tie more than 2 notes. And it's okay to tie notes of different values. Just remember, the only thing that is allowed to come in between 2 tied notes is a bar line, but not another note. When you have another note in between, it's not a tie anymore. It's considered a slur. That's all for today.